"Mummy hasn't eaten. Can you share expired bread?" the boy asked, while Single Dad CEO walked into the bakery. The snow fell softly that December evening, each flake catching the amber glow of the streetlights along Maple Avenue. Inside Rosewood Bakery, the display cases gleamed under warm lighting, showcasing rows of golden pastries and crusty loaves that filled the air with a scent of butter and yeast. Margaret Chun had owned the bakery for 32 years. At 61, her hands still shaped dough with the same practiced movements they had since she was a young woman learning her grandmother's recipes. But lately, those hands trembled slightly as she locked the register each night, counting coins that barely covered the rising costs of flour and rent. The bell above the door chimed. Margaret looked up to see a small figure hesitating in the doorway. A boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, stood framed against the snowy twilight. His green jacket was thin for the weather, and his knit cap sat crooked on his head. His cheeks were flushed pink from the cold. "We're about to close, sweetheart," Margaret said gently, though something in the child's uncertain posture made her pause. The boy stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. His eyes traveled across the pastries with an expression that tightened something in Margaret's chest. It wasn't simple, wanting. It was hunger mixed with resignation, the look of someone who had learned not to expect much. "Ma'am," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper, "do you have any expired bread?" Margaret set down the tray she'd been holding. "Expired bread? Yes, ma'am. Bread that's too old to sell. Mummy says sometimes stores throw it away, but maybe we could have it instead." He swallowed hard, his small hands clasped in front of him. "Mommy hasn't eaten today. She gave me her lunch. Can you share expired bread?" The words hung in the air between them. Margaret felt her throat constrict. 40 years of living had taught her to recognize genuine need, and this child carried it like a weight far too heavy for his small shoulders. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Oliver." "Mum." "Well, Oliver, let me see what I have in the back." Margaret walked toward the kitchen, her mind racing. She did have the old bread. Loaves she would normally mark down or donate to the shelter on Wednesday mornings, but something about this situation demanded more than routine charity. This was a child asking for scraps to feed his mother. She was wrapping 2 fresh loaves and adding some dinner rolls when the bell chimed again. Margaret glanced through the kitchen doorway and saw a man enter, shaking snow from his dark overcoat. He was tall, perhaps in his late 30s, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of corporate boardrooms and important meetings. His eyes swept the bakery with the efficient assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating situations quickly. Then his gaze landed on Oliver. "There you are," the man said, relief evident in his voice. "Oliver, you can't just run off like that." Oliver's eyes widened. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. I just thought I could help. I saw the bakery, and—" "I know," the man said, his voice gentler now as he crouched down to the boy's level. "But your mother is worried. We've been looking for you for 20 minutes. Margaret emerged from the kitchen, bags in hand, taking in this new dynamic. The man stood, noticing her for the first time. Their eyes met, and Margaret saw something shift in his expression as he registered the bags she carried and the protective way she moved toward. "Oliver, I'm Julian Harrison," he said, extending his hand. "I apologize for any trouble. Oliver and his mother. They're staying in the apartment building I own, on 4th Street. Margaret shook his hand, her grip firm despite her age. "Margaret soon. No trouble at all. Oliver was just asking about bread." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked down at Oliver, whose face had flushed with embarrassment. "We talked about this," Julian said quietly. "You don't need to ask strangers for food. But, Mommy, I know." Julian's voice cracked slightly. He ran a hand through his dark hair, and Margaret saw the exhaustion beneath his polished exterior. "I know she's proud, but I'm handling it." Margaret watched this exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't a simple story of poverty and wealth. There were layers here. Complicated human emotions that defied The bread is already wrapped, Margaret said firmly, and it would be wasteful to let it sit until morning. Oliver was doing me a favor by asking. Julian met her eyes again, and in that moment, a silent conversation passed between them. She was offering him a way to accept help on behalf of the child and his mother. Without damaging anyone's pride, he recognized the gift for what it was. That's very kind, he said finally. What do we owe you? Consider it closing time clearance. Margaret handed the bags to Oliver, whose face lit up with pure joy. Oliver, you take good care of your mother. You hear me? Yes, Mom. Thank you, ma'am. As the boy clutched the bags, Julian reached for his wallet, but Margaret held up her hand. I mean, some things aren't transactions, Mr. Harrison. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. Thank you, Mrs. Chun. It's Ms. Actually, never married. Married to this bakery instead. For better or worse, a small smile touched Julian's lips. It's a beautiful place. How long have you been here? 32 years. This January, though I'm not sure I'll see 33, the way things are going. The admission surprised her. She hadn't meant to say it, but something about this strange evening had loosened her usual reserve. Julian's expression grew thoughtful. May I ask what's happening? Margaret shrugged, suddenly feeling every one of her 61 years. The same story as 100 other small businesses in this city. Rent keeps climbing, costs keep rising, customers keep moving to those big chain stores with their cheaper prices. I've held on longer than most. But there's only so long you can run on stubbornness and nostalgia. Oliver had been listening quietly, his arms wrapped around the bags of bread. But this is the nicest bakery I've ever seen, he said. It smells like Christmas and home together. Margaret's eyes grew misty. Thank you, sweetheart. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time. Julian crouched down again, adjusting Oliver's crooked hat. We should get you back. Your mother will be frantic. As they turned toward the door, Julian paused. Miss Chun, would it be all right if we came back? I'd like to try some of those pastries properly. As paying customers, you're welcome any time, Margaret said warmly. After they left, she stood alone in the empty bakery, watching through the window as Julian placed a protective hand on Oliver's shoulder, guiding him through the snow. The streetlights cast long shadows across the white-dusted sidewalk, and for a moment, Margaret felt the full weight of her solitude. She had never had children of her own. The bakery had consumed her youth, and then suddenly she was middle-aged, then older, with nothing but cooling ovens and empty tables to greet her at the end of each day. Tonight, the briefest interaction with one small boy had reminded her of what she'd sacrificed. But as she locked the door and turned off the lights, Margaret felt something else too, a small warmth that hadn't been there before. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness gave back more than they took. She didn't expect to see them again. In her experience, people said these polite things and meant them in the moment, but then life intervened and memories faded. So when the bell chimed the next morning and Oliver burst through the door, followed by Julian and a young woman with long blonde hair and exhausted eyes, Margaret froze in surprise. Oliver insisted. Julian said with a wry smile, and I promised we'd come as paying customers. The woman stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. I'm Sarah, Oliver's mother. I want to thank you for your kindness yesterday. Oliver told me everything. Margaret saw the pride and embarrassment warring in Sarah's expression, the way her worn coat contrasted with Julian's expensive one, the dignity she maintained despite circumstances that had clearly battered her. There's nothing to thank me for, Margaret said. But since you're here, let me make you some hot chocolate. It's a family recipe. As they sat at one of the small tables, Oliver, between his mother and Julian, Margaret brought over steaming mugs and a plate of fresh cinnamon rolls. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the steam rising from the cups and making everything glow with soft light. These are incredible, Sarah said, after her first bite, and the pure pleasure on her face made Margaret's heart swell. They talked for over an hour. Margaret learned that Sarah had been a nurse before medical bills from Oliver's premature birth had buried them in debt. She'd been working multiple jobs, trying to climb out, when a car accident had left her unable to work for 3 months. By the time she recovered, she'd lost everything: her apartment, her savings, her sense of security. Julian had found them sleeping in their car 2 weeks ago in the parking lot of one of his properties. He'd offered them a vacant apartment, asking for nothing in return. But Sarah's pride had made the situation complicated. She insisted on working off the rent, but her injuries still limited what she could do. "I'm looking for work," Sarah said firmly. "Something will come through." Margaret listened to all of this, and slowly an idea began to form. It was probably foolish. It certainly wasn't practical. But Margaret had learned over 61 years that the most important decisions rarely made sense on paper. "I have a proposition," she said carefully. "I need help in the bakery. Someone to work the morning shift, handle customers, maybe learn some basic baking. The pay isn't much, but it comes with benefits all. The day-old bread and pastries you can carry home, and meals during your shift." Sarah's eyes widened. "I don't have any experience in a bakery." "You have a good heart and a strong work ethic. I can teach the rest." "Miss Chun, I can't." "You can, and you will. If you want to. That is, consider it a business decision. I'm getting older, and I need help. You need work. Sometimes the universe arranges these things." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. Oliver reached for her hand, squeezing it tight. Julian looked away, but not before Margaret caught the sheen in his own eyes. That was how it began. Sarah started the following Monday, arriving early and staying late, absorbing everything Margaret taught her with fierce concentration. Oliver would come after school, doing his homework at the corner table, occasionally helping to arrange cookies in the display case under Margaret's supervision. And Julian became a regular fixture too, stopping by each morning before work. Then again in the evening, Margaret watched as something shifted between him and Sarah, a gradual thawing that neither of them seemed to fully acknowledge. They orbited each other carefully, respectfully, two wounded people learning to trust again. The bakery itself seemed to come alive in ways Margaret hadn't experienced in years. Customers remarked on the warmth of the atmosphere, the way it felt more like visiting a friend than patronizing a business. Sarah had a gift for remembering names and preferences, making each person feel seen. On Christmas Eve, as they prepared to close early, Julian arrived with an envelope. "Don't open it now," he said, pressing it into Margaret's hands. "Just know that sometimes investors recognize value where others only see expense. This bakery, what you built here, it matters. Let me help preserve it." Margaret opened the envelope later that night, alone in her small apartment above the bakery. Inside was a check that would cover 6 months of rent and repairs, along with a simple note in Julian's precise handwriting. "For teaching me that kindness compounds in ways money never can. Merry Christmas," she cried then. Deep sobbing tears of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. At 61, she had thought herself beyond surprise, beyond the capacity for her life to change dramatically. But here she was, holding proof that even in our later years, grace can find us in unexpected forms. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the city in fresh white silence. In the bakery below, the ovens had cooled for the night, but tomorrow they would warm again, filling the air with a scent of bread and hope, and the kind of nourishment that feeds more than just the body. Sometimes all it takes is one child asking one question: "Can you share?" Expired bread to remind us that we're all hungry for something, and sometimes the greatest gift we can give is recognizing that hunger in others and responding not with judgment, but with open hands and open hearts. That's when life becomes rich. regardless of what's in our bank accounts or how many years we have behind us. That's when we discover we're not alone after all, but part of an intricate web of human connection that sustains us through the coldest winters. And that's worth more than all the fresh bread in the world. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your comments mean the world and help stories like these reach others who might need them. Thank you for listening.